Okay, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about strategies for user-centered design. So a quick reminder or a quick detail about what we're going to be doing. So here's the link to what it is, this presentation, the link to the form that you're going to fill out, and then I would also suggest on this daily slides you've got this is a pretty funny video that's worth watching that tells you a little bit about usability testing. So it starts off, it looks something like this. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you did a usability testing on a fruit? So I would suggest you take the time, pause my video to have a watch of their video, because it's quite good. It's very useful. So if you don't watch it, I may even watch it again in class just as a reminder because I really like it. So watch this video. Okay? All right, let's get started. So user-centered design, remember, similar to all of this topic, everything really is about the user's wants and needs. All right? So again, here's that link to the funny fruit video. Here's a little introduction video to that gives you a little bit more details about user-centered design. Okay. So at a glance, you've seen some of these things before, and this is your first question on the form. So which one of these testing methods are you familiar with? Which ones have you seen before and which ones haven't? We'll talk a little bit about these different things like field research. We'll talk about interviews. We talk about focus groups and go over some examples. But basically, these are the ways, these things you can use now that we know about affordance, now that we know about learnability and usability. Now it's how to test it and find out from the user what strategies can we use to find out from the user to make the product or interface or app, whatever it is, better. Okay. So there's that question. So fill that one out and then head back to the video. Okay. So the first thing to talk about, not necessarily, which is, you might not assume, you think, oh, well, it's probably going to be surveys, or it's going to be questionnaires, or it's going to be some type of testing, but it's also important to consider the environments. So there's different things that are called usability labs, where people go in and they test products and they look at videos, and then people are watching in different areas of the lab and they're trying to get feedback about that type of that actual space, or they're trying to get feedback from the product in this kind of set up laboratory, versus natural environments, which can be, they're more comfortable, they're more realistic. Sorry, testers can do it at home, and so these kind of depend on the type of product that's being tested and the type of test that's being done. So here's another video too, if you'd like to see that. Blink Labs, the one who did the fruit usability test. This is a tour around their laboratory, but things look something like this, versus just being at home or being outside. And so those make the test quite different. So that environment is also really important. Remember, in usability, the task, the environment, and the user are those three big things. Okay? So, and based off of that, one of the first tests is called a field research or field trials. So they want to check out and see, sometimes they'll do testing in the lab, but then the next step is to see it, how it's really working in real life. So this person is filming some type of medical operation, and they're trying to see what's going on, how this medical device is working in a real life situation rather than in some type of laboratory. So that's a big difference, and that really, there's all kinds of factors that you can't control, that you don't know about, and so field research or field trials are where that happens. So that's that real life environment versus a laboratory. So other types of field research. So this, even though this isn't in the field, but it's still considered field research, is a performance test. So you can click on this and watch it, but it's pretty much a smart car crashing into a wall. So this is the performance test that's trying to use conditions that simulate the real life. So it's different than a laboratory, which is the lab is still kind of controlled settings, Well, this is trying to set up some type of similar conditions. Yeah. Then we look at field trials, which is literally the actual interaction and the actual product in that actual place. So that's the difference between those two. Performance test is about the conditions. Field trial is about the actual interaction. And both of these, you can watch these videos. There's more details about those types of trials. Okay. So out in the field, here's the two types of testing: the performance test and the field trial. So advantages for the performance: precise, less human errors, good quality, collect good data. Disadvantage, as you know, with we talked about testing and we talked about mathematical or other types of performance testing and modeling, costs a lot of money, takes a lot of time. This can be field trials can be risky. They don't know a lot of things. The quality can change, more qualitative. They're not sure, it's not controlled, but it can get lots of good feedback and can really figure out how the product's being used. Disadvantage, like I said, it's not controlled, and maybe the quality data, and again, it just takes time. Okay, so that's all the stuff that happens out in the environment. Next, this is thrown in here. It's a little bit of anthropometrics information put in here, but it's still thinking about that user population and how you design certain things. So remembering about gender, anthropometrics, but also this, it's called methods of extremes. So we talked about this when the question was asked about the height of a door frame or sitting in a cinema. So these things are what are important as well, and it's just called method of extremes. So in the bell curve of anthropometrics, you've got that 50% and the 95th, right? So really it's thinking about those two, and then maybe you'll apply it to a test in some way. So A, B, and C are different types of products, and they use different types of methods of extremes. So, which leads to question number 2, A, B, C. So in the above methods of extremes, tell me what is important, the 95th or the 5th percentile, when, so it's different than percentile ranges because we're just looking at the either ends, the 5th or the 95th. So tell me about these products and what's important, okay? So A, I've already given you the answer. It's the escape hatch. 95th percentile is based on the width because everybody needs to get out, but the 5th percentile is based on the strength to open the actual latch, so anybody can escape for safety reasons. So how about these buttons, and how about this chair? Okay, check out the pedals, check out the distance, and you're just going to write your answer here. Okay, so write that down, methods of extremes. A couple of other examples as well too. So if you looked at these different focuses on what needs to be done, here's the examples, here's the anthropometric data that's being considered, and then here's that user, the method of extreme that should be thought about. So this is just a little bit more detail related to anthropometrics and percentile ranges. Okay. Now, away from natural into a little bit more details in maybe laboratories. So things like this are observations and interviews and questionnaires and focus groups. So observations, it's the most obvious. Interviews are, you've seen, heard of these things, questionnaires. Focus groups might be something new. Maybe you've heard of the word before. So to understand focus groups, watch this video again, a good one, a pretty funny one. I like this one. It's about smartphones, and there's different types of focus groups that they've used. So have a watch that one. And then there's actually a question that I would like you to answer. Which focus group is the most useless in your opinion? Watch and you'll understand. Okay, so focus groups essentially are looking at a certain age range, a certain type, a certain demographic. They're taking all those details of the user population, and then you can ask a focus group of people information about that product. Okay, to find out data or information to make it better or to figure out more about usabilities. Okay, so that's a focus group. Have a watch of that video. Okay, another one, more detail, is the user trials. Remember we talked a little bit about this. So observation is an important one. Again, I've talked about this before. There's probably somebody behind just watching, paying attention to how this user is interacting. Then there's someone else who's taking notes and trying to figure out what's going on. Here's just another photo of a similar situation. Again, that's likely in laboratories because they've got some type of setup. Okay, that's user trial versus user research. So questionnaires, surveys, interviews and the reason why it's called a trial is because they're trying this out versus this is just asking somebody questions or taking a survey. I spelled questionnaires wrong. There we go. So that's research versus trials. All right. So here's again that difference: observations versus responses. So you're just getting responses from a person versus people are actually trying this out and you're getting feedback from them as they're trying it out. So that's the difference between user research and user trials. Write that down, pay attention to that. Okay? So in a survey, there's things that are important like age, ethnicity, gender, size, and I want you to just do another survey yourself about candy bars, sweets related to user-centered design. So you'll click on this link, or you can also find it in here. But I want you to think like, what's important? Consider these factors. What's good? What's not good? Why is it bad? Why isn't it? So answer some of these questions about what do you prefer, about the shape, what is your favorite size. Pay attention. I'm also using, this is nominal, right? This one's ordinal, and this is another nominal type of a question. So just ask what's the difference and what's good or what's bad about these things, okay? Oops. Go on to the next slide, okay? So here's a little bit more detail, some of those advantages and disadvantages. Press pause, have a quick read through, okay? Similar to stuff that we talked about already. Okay, next task is there's a list of different examples. And what I want you to do is tell me, so is this literature research? Is that kind of secondary data collection? User trials, so that's something else that we just talked about. Expert appraisal, it's self-explanatory, but you're trying to collect information from an expert. And performance testing, talked about performance testing. So there's two on there that we didn't go over explicitly, but I think you're smart and you can figure it out. So A, which one is it? And then you tell me, is it user trial? B, which one is it? Which one are these different examples? Okay. That's not the correct answers, by the way. I'm just selecting them so I can move on to the next. So here you go, C, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Which one is it? And just in the drop-down menu, select. Okay, next. So that's just some more examples, okay? The last little, there's two kind of little parts, but one other thing about design or as we're using, those are different strategies that we talked about, different testing methods. But this is also where you include the actual person or people or participants or community in the design. Excuse me. So what you should do with this is just understanding how they can actually use people in design. So here's a couple of examples of how people are using design and getting feedback, getting information to try to involve them on the decision-making process and the designs. One example, there was this architect in Chile actually won a really important award last year, but basically he designed these kind of shells of buildings, but the whole purpose was he wanted his users or the owners to customize and create their own designs. So here's them sketching some out. Here's the actual building and what they can do to change it to make it better. So it's all about this participatory design. So how can people be involved in the design process? I was really, really interested in this when I studied architecture because that's what happens most of the time. The clients will design or do their own things. So it's really interesting. If you want to know more, you can click on that website to find out about this project. But your next task is going to be to find a video or an example of some other type of participatory design. Okay, so you'll link it in here and you'll put it in here, and that is actually the last question in the form. But one more thing to talk about, two more things to talk about in the presentation. Okay, so affinity diagrams. This is basically a way just to organize all kinds of information that you collect or brainstorming, and it's based on these 7 kind of principles or ideas. And so cost, adjustability, ease of use, compatibility, safety, training, learnability. So you'll notice that a lot of these are similar to the things that we talked about in usability. One example is trying to create so if you can create here's this diagram that's related to toys or some type of learning toys. So if we looked at this, talk about safety, ease of use, cost, measurements, personality, and you're just giving them some type of categories. Really, you just categorize these types of information as it's brainstormed or as the data is collected. So it's more of a way to collect. As you collect all this data, how do you represent it and show it with these affinity diagrams? Okay. Last thing, paper prototyping. We've seen this before, but just another reminder. So using that target market or using that user group and trying to, this is a method or a way that you can test, right? You've got all those different strategies, but here's an actual thing you can use, is these lots of paper prototypes. We've seen these before. So here's kind of what it looks like. There's a facilitator, there's a user, there's a computer, there's observers. So as people, you can watch this video too. This is kind of cool to show how some of those paper prototypings work. So you can have a look on that. Yeah, I like that one. And then also why it's good, inexpensive, easy. You already answered that question last week in a last. So there's some more detail on that. Okay, this thing, we're going to do a task first thing when we get back to class. So you can read through it, but this is what we're going to do. You're going to design your own a little website or some type of app for children's learning using paper prototyping, and then we'll talk about observability, and we'll talk about the strategies for user-centered design. Okay, so that's it. Strategies for user-centered design. Don't forget to submit your form and like button. Don't forget to click on that like button. Anyway, have a good day, and we'll see you soon. Bye.